customers, via video or voice. That there's a payments mechanism associated with it. It's basically for people who don't have insurance at the moment, and for them to be able to sort of have, it's sort of the modern version of the corner, emergency community health. But as far as the mobile health thing goes, it's as hot as it could be, because there probably aren't too many bigger problems that we've got, at least in the U.S., in reducing the growth in healthcare costs. And I think there's almost unanimous agreement, maybe how we get there's big disagreements, but there's unanimous agreement that anything that would take costs out of the system would be great. Again, implementing those is pretty hard, but so I think it's a huge market, and there's lots of people looking. And the nice thing is, a lot of the technology is available. That's not the problem. It's adoption by doctors, adoption by consumers. There's still a lot of people that want to see someone in person. It's still a big deal. And so I'm not sure exactly what the question was, but it's a hot venture market right now. Lots of companies, lots of activity, lots of investments.
There's a chance that the new technologies that are coming out, that you can actually get FDA-approved data on your body, that the client, the patient-doctor relationship could fundamentally change from the doctor basically getting all the information and storing it and telling you what's going on to, here's my information, doctor, and I want you to be a data analyst to kind of figure out, interpret the data for me, but it's my data, I own it. I think there's something very powerful about that could be really, really interesting in this whole category.
There's a question over here from Chintan, one of our volunteers.
Hi guys, I had a question. With all the advances in the mobility space, what do you think is, the future of its contributions in the automotive side with cars and with wireless charging? And so many new things coming out with ADAS and things like that. So how do you see this play an important role in what's next to come with the automotive market?
I don't want to dominate. I just completed an investment in a company called Mogio, and basically what they do is they have a cartridge that plugs into your ODB port, and it's got a 3G connection, a Wi-Fi connection, a Bluetooth connection, accelerometer, and they're building a development platform around that so that because basically your car is a computer on wheels. It has a CAN system and everything that's going on in your car, like how fast you're braking, how much you're speeding, or the speed, are you in drive or you're not in drive, all this information is now going to be flooded and be able to get access to that data in the cloud. Really interesting kinds of applications to, where's my daughter driving right now? And is she driving too fast? She's braking too hard, or is she more probably is she accelerating, And, or, when I leave my house, I want my smart thing sensors to turn off all the lights in my house because it's known that my car, or right now, is my car being towed and the accelerometer is picking up. And so there's lots of really interesting, or stolen. Yeah, so there's lots of really interesting applications. Again, when you kind of layer on all these sensors and this data, and this is, and I think the car is a big use case for context where you spend a lot of our time in our world. It's complicated because there's big OEMs and they have their systems, but they're all proprietary and siloed. So how do developers get access to that ecosystem, I think, is an interesting question. And that's sort of part of the thesis that we have around our early ones. So I think it's an interesting area. It's fraught with problems too, with big incumbent and players.
It's always tended to have very long design cycles. That's always been the drawback, is how long from engaging with a car company to getting into a model year would it take. I think that's really compressing. I think the car companies are running scared now. Obviously sales are declining. But I just read a statistic that almost 65% of new cars are sold to people older than 50, which isn't a great demographic trend for the automotive industry, right? So, I think what they're all trying to do is compete on technology. So when you talk about Internet of Things, I think automobile is right there in the mix. And there's a lot of interesting things around sensing, vision, cameras, self-driving. A lot of stuff can be brought into the mix.
Maybe there's just more parents buying cars for their kids. That's just a question a little bit.
I was just going to say, I was an EIR at Venrock before I got the current job. It was 2006. And I don't know if some of you remember a standard called, I think it's DSRC. it was supposed to be, I forgot whether it's a 5 gigahertz or a 2 gigahertz channel that was gonna allow vehicle-to-vehicle communications or vehicle-to-curb. And so there was gonna be a nationwide network of kind of base stations. I think it was Wi-Fi, so I think it was.
It was 5.2.
Was it 5.2? Okay, so it wasn't Wi-Fi, and it wasn't Wi-Fi protocol, but the point I wanted to make is that was 9 years ago. And I did a bunch of work and I got so excited about it. It's 9 years later, still hasn't happened. I mean, it's kind of what Eric said. It's not just what's in the cars, but you could do some tremendous things if you had the cars actually communicating and interacting. But the automotive industry, to get them to sort of agree to do these kinds of things, it's pretty painful.
You collision avoidance, so your Mercedes won't hit another Mercedes. But you might hit BMW.
My Honda.
So no self-driving cars anytime too soon? Yeah, that's true.
Really good discussion. One of the things I thought about is virtually all of these applications, the input is essentially free. In other words, data coming off phone sensors, things in stores. Basically, the input or the raw materials for all these apps are essentially free. If I'm a high-value consumer, why would I give away my data? Wouldn't I ever say, if you want my data, I'm a retired or a student or a car purchaser, you bid for my data. Why are we giving this away for free?
It's not worth very much to most people, I think, is the very short answer. There have actually been some academic exercises trying to value personal data,
Yeah.
and it really isn't worth that much at an individual level.
Well,
So on the aggregate
To
or on
trigger the whole idea, but I think, by the way, I think that trend's an interesting, it's an interesting concept, right?
I just don't know, I don't know the answer. It's like-
And there's certain data that's more valuable than other, right? The idea that you might buy a car is not that interesting, but if you're about to buy a car, then that becomes really
If I was
interesting.
already to buy a car, and you aggregate 1,000 people like me, that would have value.
Well,
Yeah, absolutely.
well, here's some perspective. There's a company, we're in a company called Clout. Have you ever seen your Clout score? And the model is not so obvious, but what they're looking is for people to basically be active in social networks and talk about what they're good at. And the company talks about influencers. And so people who, for example, know a lot about cars and who talk a lot about cars and who, it's like academic papers, you get measured not how much you say, but how much people say, re-say what you said. And then companies find out who the influencers are. So if you're gonna come out with a new Mercedes and you're Daimler, they go to Cloud and they say, could you give us the 100 people who talk the most about Mercedes and who influence other people? They give you a free car, they give you a free, whatever, there's a lot of, so your data is valuable, but it has to be, it's kind of what, Eric, it's not just a little, you actually have to have a big voice, but the market does respond to that. If you actually have data that's valuable, there are companies that actually will pay you for it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So question up here.
Front or second?
Front.
Hi, we've talked a lot about, or heard a lot about applications, about big data, and a little bit about hardware. Could you talk about what you think is the hot telecommunications hardware that's coming, or going to be coming out?
Steve?
That's you, man.
As it relates to mobile, I think the big trend we're looking at right now is small cell, right, which leads into the December 7th forum, right? I mean, so it's
December
very,
11th, yes.
yeah, very topical, right? I mean, all the stuff we're talking about is only plausible when you have the network capacity to support the traffic. So that's the big trend I see. I'm not sure if that's too good a term for you or not. Right, I think that's really the key to focus on, and there's a lot of variations on that, right? Whether it's LTE or Wi-Fi, and how carriers integrate Wi-Fi, the ability to have carrier or have Wi-Fi technology behave like cellular. So you have carrier offered Wi-Fi that offers roaming capabilities and pricing exchange, right? So you can effectively support other people's customers and get paid for that. I think this is all coming and not a moment too soon either.
General sense from you guys, do you feel like over the next 5-7 years, there's enough quote-unquote capacity? Small cells get it done, LTE
Yeah.
hands?
I think it's like, was there ever enough memory? Who was it that said 640, was it Gates that said delivery number before? 640
Yeah, I don't know if he said it,
I think it was Bill Gates. Yeah, well, I was gonna say, the other answer, the technology thing, it seems like almost the last thing, but probably won't be. But antennas are still very material, because all of the, I'm in a company that's doing set-top boxes, it's beam steering and MIMO, so that you can take your TV anywhere in the house. And then you've got LTE, which is, the performance is heavily based on beam steering and MIMO and multi-user MIMO. And then there's new satellite, there's new space stuff. People are launching new satellites, and there's this company called Chimeta in Seattle that has a technology that they call it metamaterials, and basically allows you to make really small planar antennas that you can do beam steering without phase shifters. So you can make a very small flat plate antenna that'll find satellites where you need the small. So a lot of the tech and telecom stuff, I'm not sure if it's great for startups because it might be a little too late, but it's kind of in the transition phase where a lot of technology that's happening today, we're getting either capacity or coverage performance or doing things we couldn't do, it's because of antennas. But what scares me is I'm not sure what's next.
So the other thing that's necessary, of course, is the backhaul. I mean, you put up a 5G site, that's fine. You can't get data into that site, it's not a 5G site. It's a 4G site that they're selling you as a 5G site.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have to solve the backhaul question as well,
Right.
and that's a big potential area.
Right, and the issue, of course, becomes that you can't always get fiber to the places you want to put these small cells. So yeah, we're invested in a company called Fastback Networks, which is developing this idea of non-line of sight backhaul. We actually call it any line of sight, because once you can do non-line of sight, you can certainly do line of sight, and you just go faster. But yeah, the idea, how do you get hundreds of megabits of data throughput and ultimately a gigabit of data throughput to just oddball places, because you're going to be hanging these small cells that are going to look a lot more like Wi-Fi access points when we think of as a cell site. And how do you connect this all up? The idea of self-organizing networks as well, which I always found that sort of contradiction in terms, because there's always something organizing these self-organizing networks. But Intucell is an Israel-based company that Cisco acquired for quite a lot of money. Yeah, exactly. And I think most folks that are selling these type of small cell networks are going to need that type of capability as well. Again, not necessarily startup friendly unless you get some brilliant scientists behind it, but it's an area of opportunity, no doubt.
So I'll take one last question before we get ready to wrap, because I know also Eric's got to jump too. So there was a hand in the back of the room that was up for a little while.
I'm interested in the topic of NFV. This isn't a purely mobile investment area, but it's, I think the mobile operators invest more aggressively in innovative infrastructure. And I think it's interesting in that it's actually being pushed by the operators back up the technology stack. And so I see quite a bit of demand from mobile operators, especially in data centers. And I think that the technology industry, both big and small, is kind of playing catch-up mode, where the demand's already existing and the technology isn't quite there to fill it.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I think NFV is an important idea, important trend. I mean, it's kind of an encore, if you will, to SDN in general, right? Which you get a number of people in the room, and you get people arguing how it's the most relevant technology in the world, and others suggesting that it's not going to see the light of day for another decade. So there is a question on timeline of deployment of, when something like NFV becomes truly commercially important. But I agree, I think it's an important idea, important concept. Oh, NFV stands for Network Function Virtualization. So the idea of pushing a lot of these network functions, not as sort of discrete devices and boxes with ports that you put in the network, but you virtualize them and stick them in the cloud.
So as we wrap up here, I'd like for each of you to plug, your two favorite startups right now. Who are they? What are they? 30 seconds each.
Sure. For me, the two mobile startups I'm excited about are, one is a Korean company, AirPlug. What we do is we take all those different wireless networks like cellular Wi-Fi and make them work as one. So transparently, and we just deployed in KT, and the performance has been very good. The other is, and it's perfect for video streaming. And the other is, as I mentioned, the company Mobile Iron, that we're getting a lot of traction in mobile enterprise.
I actually prepared this question that I didn't know was just our companies. I actually had a company that's mine and one that's not, that I thought was impactful and disruptive. I mentioned Fastback, that's an interesting company we're invested in. There's another one called Pelican Imaging. It's back to this concept of sensing, right? What's the most important sense we have? Some would argue your sight, right? So cameras, I think, are really vital. Pelican Imaging is an interesting company. We're trying to re-architect the camera. Instead of the single lens, single sensor, full spectrum device, we're developing an array camera. So our first product we're bringing to market is a 4x4 array. So we have 16 discrete cameras. We assign particular spectrum characteristics to each camera. Could make some infrared, by the way, if you want low light characteristics. And take 16 pictures at once. Pelican has software that resolves those 16 discrete images into one super resolution image. Also, we got 16 cameras. What you get is a very accurate depth map as well, which I think triggers a whole lot of applications. But, you can do refocus, which is always nice. Never take a bad picture, but I think a lot of other cool stuff falls out. Sizing, the ability to do scanning for input for 3D printing. And I think another company, back to the question was, what's disruptive? There's a company I just saw at Qualcomm Ventures recently, which was Xiaomi. The company blew my mind, right? I've heard of Xiaomi, right? But these guys are just, talk about changing the, right now it's Apple, it's Samsung, these guys are very dominant, everybody's quaking in their wake, everybody else is falling to the wayside and dying. You have this Chinese company, which is taking them on, and in some, I imagine they're out shipping Apple in terms of volumes by quite a wide margin at this point in time. Perhaps not Samsung yet, but they've really, to me, they're almost like the Dell computer of smartphones, right? They're sourcing their own components, they're building these things very cheaply, selling them at a very low cost price. What they're talking about is $99 off contract, full function Android smartphone. And I think things like this are really going to shake up the market because, I don't know about you, I think a market dominated by Apple and Samsung is not that interesting.
Well, I guess I gave you mine already. I like that indoor, very close proximity technology is very cool. And
Can you give a name?
can't give a name. Yes, I can't,
So
sorry.
why don't you
Call me
start
next
taking
week.
names? I'll call you next week?
Yeah, call me next week.
Tweet it out first.
Yeah, can you show me how to do that?
Ouch. If you need help with that one, I sold with the Apple, so but we did. So I think I already talked about, I'm really excited about this mobile health scan and do company. I think it's really exciting because it really could change lives and make a big impact in the world. I think that's really exciting. There's also one that, and I also talked a little bit about the connected car thing, a company called Mojio. I think that's pretty exciting. The other one that I didn't mention that I think is really interesting, very fascinating, it's a relatively large seed investment that we made. It's a company called BioNim, and they have this product called the NIMI. So it's another wearable, like you think, okay, Fitbit, right? But this wearable is very different. And it basically has a technology in it that will listen to your EKC, or electrocardiogram, and it'll basically create an identity based on your heart rate. So it's a bracelet that's with you all the time, and it can open your car, it can authenticate you on your phone, it can authenticate you. So it's this whole identity thing, this thing about identity that has been really struggling, and these guys have really kind of brought some really fascinating technology that basically makes these little, this Fitbit is just a pedometer, but this thing can actually add real value to you as a user in terms of you know who you are based on your own heart rate. So I think that's really cool.
You want to hear something weird? There's a company doing exactly the same thing, but doing it at 6 feet.
Yeah.
And so when you walk up to a bank or you walk up to passport control, they can identify you based on your arterial structure and your blood flow.
Yeah.
My
And so-
privacy, I don't know if I want
Gone.
to.
You didn't care. We're done.
Well, thank you guys all for coming, and
Yeah. All right, before everyone takes off, let's have a round of applause for our friends. I want to say thank you to everyone who's been here, and also, the way I've got this, I keep looking for a push to talk on the side. It's driving me nuts. So the hams laugh. But I'd like to offer this to you, Danielle. I think Tehi and Eric, you've had one of the books before. You've gotten another copy, but John is new. So this is just a gift for you folks, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I'd like all the volunteers to stand up. Everyone who's involved in WCA, if you're part of this team, please stand up and be recognized. Don't be shy. Come on. So if you like what you saw tonight, we are an all-volunteer organization. If you want to be a part of this, please let us know. Look for the folks with the plastic badges, talk to us. We have plenty of volunteer opportunities. We'd love to talk to you about how you can become part of the team. Thank you all for coming tonight.
We'll have a few minutes for you to mingle with the speakers and WCA.